What you're about to watch is part 3 of my theory speculating Luffy's ascension to godhood. In part 1 I talked about how New Nightmare Luffy could be born from the souls of the dead, and that Gear 5th may be born from the spirits of nature. I'm not going into detail summarizing it for a third time. If you haven't watched it, then there will be a link in the description or press the I button in the corner. In part 2 I talked about how Luffy drawing in power from his surroundings could result in him entering various forms of Gear 5th based on his environment. So for example, if Luffy were to be in a place full of sunlight, perhaps he can draw in power, and similar to how photosynthesis works. He could enter Gear 5th SunGod if his environment were to be bright, hot, or dry. On the contrary, if he were in a moonlit area, he could see a different result. Similar to how the waves of the ocean are influenced by the moon, so could Luffy. Gear 5th Moon God could have come from a dark, moist, or cold environment. Before I get into fun brainstorming of hypothetical Gear 5th forms, I will further explain the mechanics of how I think Gear 5th can be entered, which is just as fun, in my opinion. In my Understanding Haki series, I talk about how I believe the colors of Haki correlate to the 7 chakras. Each of the chakra has its own element associated with it. In addition, each color has its own frequency. Breathing is also a frequency. Every breath is either in or out. Each gear form involves breathing in some way, but Gear 5th will require Luffy's breath work to be perfect. So I believe each Gear 5th form Luffy takes will be him breathing at a frequency that resonates with his surrounding. As shown with the breath of all things through Zoro, the surroundings do have their own each individual breath. Thus why Luffy's mastery of Haki is just as important as the Devil Fruit Awakening when it comes to attaining Gear 5th. Devil Fruit Awakening is primarily for Luffy to get in touch with his environment, aka the outer nature. However, the mastery of Haki is what will get Luffy in touch with his inner nature. The two coming together brings about enlightenment and power worthy of a god. Last week's video was all about Gear 5th SunGod, but Luffy isn't a one-trick pony. Luffy, and by extension Oda, are too creative to only have just one form. As the name implies, Moon God would be the opposite of Sun God in many ways. Moon God would be less powerful than Sun God in terms of offensive capabilities, but to make up for it, it would be more defensive. A weakness I envision for SunGod is that it requires Luffy to be so active it wouldn't give him enough time to properly strategize. So it would be good for Luffy to also have a form that allows him time to use his talent for creative battle plans. To contrast the fiery SunGod, Luffy's Moon God form would be water themed. If you watch Understanding Haki 2, then you understand that I believe the second level of Haki correlates to the sacral chakra, which also happens to have the element of water. Advanced Armament Haki, often referred to as Ryo, doesn't use literal water, but rather the fluid aura of the user's Haki. The aura around their body is the representation of water. However, in the case of Fishman Karate, they do use actual water. When you look at the way water surrounds the fist of a Fishman Karate master, and the aura that surrounds the fist of a Ryo master, you will see similarities. Have you noticed that 2 awakened users have displayed a fluid aura when using their Devil Fruit abilities? I'm referring to Katakuri and Law. Perhaps there's a connection between Devil Fruit Awakening and the mastery of Haki. I'll talk about this and more in Understanding Haki Part 4. But let's not get off topic. With all that being said about fluid aura, a cool concept for Moon God is that Luffy activates a sphere of aura around his body that protects, propels, reflects, and even has the property of rubber due to Devil Fruit Awakening. The reflecting part being especially symbolic considering he becomes a Moon God. While Sun God will be constantly breathing in energy, aka chi, Luffy will take in one huge spiritual breath. This means that in order for Luffy to maintain this form, he will have to spiritually hold his breath. I emphasize the word spiritual because I don't want you to get confused into thinking Luffy will not breathe physical air in this form. However, metaphorically, it will resemble him holding his breath underwater. Unlike all of Luffy's other forms in which he seems to bulk up in terms of muscle, it would be both funny and genius if the form Luffy takes before becoming a Moon God shares the same appearance as Water Luffy. Similar to how Luffy wanted to fill himself up with water before battle, he will fill his body up and store a vast amount of chi. Now obviously Luffy isn't meant to fight while looking like Water Luffy, but that is the outer nature entering his body before he matches it to his inner nature. While that chi is inside his body, it assimilates and becomes Luffy's own haki, and then he projects all of that stored up haki outside of his body. The haki would take on the appearance of steam before cooling down and taking the shape of a ball, thus creating the aura sphere that surrounds him. Moon God Luffy's body inside of the sphere would slim down to the point in which his body looks similar to when the series first started. He would lose the muscle mass and get smoother, similar to the way the smooth fruit did for Alvida. Even his hair would be silky smooth as it flows freely as if Luffy was actually underwater. To add even more to the moon theme, I can imagine him being surrounded by mist to give off the appearance of the moon hidden behind the clouds. Obviously, due to Moon Man being a water-themed form, it wouldn't be flame clouds. However, clouds would still be appropriate for this form, given that clouds are literally made of water droplets, vapor, and ice crystals. Also, Yamato seems to be very knowledgeable when it comes to flame clouds. In fact, if you notice, Yamato in her zone form seems to have a sash made out of clouds similar to Gear 4 and Kaido in his zone forms. Could she be a wisdom queen? Perhaps Yamato has her own special cloud abilities she can use and maybe even teach Luffy. Enough about clouds. Let's talk more about the main function of this form. The aura sphere protects Luffy to a point that even despite him being a devil fruit user, he would be able to fight underwater. The aura shield would propel water away from his body. The sphere is not only meant to prevent things from getting inside, but if something does get inside, then Luffy's observation haki will allow him to automatically react to the disturbance within his own sphere. He would then be able to dodge in a similar manner to that of Kamiya, aka paper art. Luffy may not be a master of Rokushiki, but he should be able to excel at having a flexible body due to him not only being rubber, but as a moon god, he would have especially fluid mobility. With a shield this overpowered, there must be a drawback. Well, because Luffy is focusing nearly all of his haki outside of his body, it would actually leave his physical body weaker than even in his normal base form. His goal while this form is active is to prevent anyone from entering his bubble as much as possible, as well as him refraining from leaving the bubble as much as possible. Now this creates a problem considering his fighting style revolves around him being able to stretch, and that could result in him leaving the bubble. As mentioned earlier, his haki bubble would also have the properties of rubber. Using his Devil Fruit Awakening, he could use the aura sphere to form stretchable and extendable arms. So, let's say he uses a technique called Bubble Gum Gum Gatling Gun. It would consist of his aura sending out the punches rather than his physical body. This would not only be a barrage of advanced armament punches, but he would also be able to make more than 2 arms from this shield. Big Bro Katakuri would be so proud. Since Luffy's body would be weaker than usual, he would be more susceptible to a pressure type of attack crush Luffy in his own bubble. In addition, he would maintain his typical weakness to stabbing and slicing attacks. To counter this, he would have the ability to freeze his bubble and make it into a solid shield. Now I don't mean that he would turn his shield into literal ice. That wouldn't be possible, especially considering his bubble wouldn't be made out of water to begin with. Because the bubble is aura made from his own haki, in addition to his Devil Fruit Awakening turning the sphere into an extension of his physical body, it would result in Luffy being able to apply the properties of armament hardening to his aura shield. This is a similar concept to King turning fire into magma, according to my Red Sea theory at least. Lowering the vibration of a liquid turns it into a solid. Not only that, but lower the vibration of sacral chakra and you get the root, which has the element of earth. Hence why Luffy's liquid-like aura would turn into something that is solid and as hard as rock. That makes me think of an earth-based Gear 5th form. Look forward to that in part 3. Staying on topic, if a moon god can freeze aura, then maybe he can even turn up the heat and send out steam-like projectiles from his aura shield to attack. Also, what if Luffy engulfs someone with his aura? If a person was surrounded by his fluid aura, could they drown? Now remember, this aura isn't physical water, but rather spiritual and non-tangible energy. so maybe not physically drown a person, but do so spiritually. Now, I'm not just pulling things out of thin air and just putting the word spiritual in front of it. I think there's a haki ability in the story that already exists that shows us what a spiritual drowning looks like. Have you ever noticed that when people are knocked out by Conqueror's haki, they appear as if they've drowned? Perhaps if Luffy can surround someone with a concentration of his aura, he can drown them using Conqueror's haki. Even people that are strong enough to usually resist the normal type of Conqueror's haki. Then you add the lightning of Conqueror's haki into the mix, and there's so many ways this power can be applied. Water is great for having electricity run through it. Fun fact, it isn't actually the water that conducts electricity, but rather what is dissolved in the water, such as salt. But we aren't talking about literal water anyway. I love to speculate all the different possibilities, but let's wrap this up. If you like this topic and want to hear more, then you're in luck. You've already heard me suggest Earth God, so in the comments section, tell me what you think that would entail, and while you're at it, see if you can predict the second god of next video. Please support the artist that provided us the illustrations to go along with the vision of my theory. Thanks for watching my food for thought. Check out the rest of my channel for more videos like this. I have a series in particular which I go all out, and I highly recommend you check it out. You have finished the main portion of the video, however, if you check the time bar, you may see more of the videos left in what I call the secret ending. I hope you catch my next video. Till then, see you next time. I hope you're having as much fun with this theory as I am. This isn't like my usual theory in which I put together a bunch of evidence to support a prediction. It's heavy on the speculation, which makes it more like fan fiction, and it's getting a little too over the place at times. I try my best to hold back from introducing too many concepts. This is the secret ending, so I might as well talk about one of those things right now. Recall when I talked about how before entering Sun or Moon God, Luffy would take on an initial physical transformation. In SunGod's case, his limbs and head would expand far too large, and Moon God would look like Water Luffy at first. Well, what if those initial forms were actually what Gear 5th is solely meant to be? And it is actually just the God forms that are Gear 6th. Now, this is an idea that really doesn't change much of the theory. It's a neat idea, but I didn't find it worth it to add that in at the cost of confusing the viewer. When I think about it, Gear 3rd and 4th also have an initial phase, Bone Balloon and Muscle Balloon, yet those aren't considered their own gears. Despite this, I won't completely dismiss the idea of an initial phase being its own gear for two reasons. One, it could be symbolic, and two, it could be both funny and compelling within the plot of the story. First off, it would be symbolic because Luffy is heavily associated with the numbers 5 and 6 in that specific order. This is because Go Mu can be read as 5-6. As a result, Gear 5th and 6th being integral to one another would be quite befitting. As for the plot, I can see Luffy learning Gear 5th around the same time that he's learning Awakening. This could have taken place before Luffy got to Onigashima. The initial intention of Gear 5th could have been in order to use alongside Gear 4th. The biggest drawback of Gear 4th is running out of stamina, so I could see Luffy coming up with Gear 5th to gain back that stamina in order to re-enter Gear 4th. He may very well use it in this manner to attempt to defeat Kaido. But even that may not be enough considering Kaido also has Awakening and is far more experienced. I think Oda would get a kick out of fans' reaction to seeing Gear 5th not be a transformation, as most anticipated. Not only that, it would be very compelling in terms of plot to see Luffy's strategy not be successful. It would be so intense that us the viewers would be on the edge of our seats and Luffy would start to get really desperate, going as far as to try and surpass his limits. And Kaido is the type of guy to give Luffy the time and space to do so because of his morbid curiosity. Unfortunately, he takes Gear 5th too far and takes in far too much chi from his surrounding, which would cause him to metaphorically inflate until he pops. Just when you think all hope is lost, that is when the ghost of Wano would find their way into Luffy's body and he becomes Neo Nightmare Luffy. As I've said earlier, it could be bittersweet for Luffy to defeat Kaido in this manner. Nobody would be more disappointed by Luffy not being able to defeat a Yonko with his own power than Luffy himself. Thus, he would eventually have to learn that he can't surpass his own limits by going backwards. Gear Forth isn't the answer. Instead of trying to utilize the power of nature to fuel his own power, he needs to become one with nature in order to utilize a power greater than himself. As a result, Luffy will learn that to prevent himself from overinflating with power, he needs to turn that extra energy into a brand new power that he would call Gear 6th, a power beyond that of man and resembling gods. If you're new to my channel, then you should check out some of my other videos where you really get to see my analytical brain at work. Please, if you haven't watched Understanding Haki, I implore you to. It has 3 parts and a 4th final installment in the works. In this video, I talk a bit about the first 3 of the 7 chakras being associated to what I believe is the 3 levels of armored haki. The 4 higher chakras are associated with observation and conqueror's haki. This information will be relevant to the next video, and it will also be the basis of why I believe the mastery of haki is what creates devil fruits. In fact, I hinted at the concept of outer and inner nature all the way back then. With that done, we have finally worked our way up the chakra ladder. So, does that mean we're finished? Perfectly enlightened, we're nowhere to go? Nope, not in the slightest. You see, the purpose of the journey is not to create the perfect reality for yourself, but rather a new reality. When one makes it all the way up to the crown, they have a reality shift, a new outlook on life. It is then that you bring this vision to the outer world to share it with others. The way this is done is by going in the opposite direction. You initially went from root to crown, now it's time to go from crown to root. And that's where we will pick it up in the next and final episode when we talk about and speculate the origin of devil fruits. If it seems like Luffy is going above and beyond the powers of rubber and making it into a brand new devil fruit, then perhaps that is because a person that masters haki does in fact craft a power like that of a devil fruit. I can't wait to make Understanding Haki Part 4. Here are some clips from Part 3 that go over each of the higher chakras. Alright, let's quickly recap. In the first part we discussed how haki is also known as Supreme Chi, being the vibrating energy that is the basis of all existence. In the second part we learned that Chi, also known as spirit or prana, will vibrate at a certain constant speed which will then determine its frequency. The true names of each haki is Bosu Shoku, Kenbu Shoku, and Hao Shoku no Haki. Enjoy this lesson on Japanese etymology presented by an underqualified weeb. Okay, so Bosu is armament, Kenbun is observation, and Hao is conquerors. Translations may vary, but you get the gist. Why I brought this to your attention is the word Shoku. In this context, Shoku means color. In fact, the Viz translation uses the word color officially. This greatly supports my theory. If haki can be related to chakra, then the different haki types certainly would have specific colors attributed to them. With that out of the way, the heart chakra is attributed to observation haki. It's a common trope when danger is afoot, someone can feel it in the air. Air is all around us. Spirit energy is all around us. Observation haki is about becoming one with air, aka spirit, in order to see it for what it truly is. Unlike the previous 3 in which the elements of earth, water, and fire were much more explicitly seen in haki, it takes a bit more understanding of chi to get why air is present in observation haki. Remember that chi, spirit, and prana all mean breath. And well, what is it that you breathe? An easy answer is air. The significance of air in relation to observation haki is that air is the essence of the spirit all around us. With observation haki, you can sense the spirit, or in other words, sense the air in other things. The more alive something is, the more air they breathe. The heart chakra is the meeting point between the physical and spiritual, the inner and outer world. The air from outside enters us, then is utilized and transformed within us. Ultimately, the air is used to fuel our hearts. Breathing fuels our soul. In many ways, the heart itself can be seen as our soul. The third eye chakra is that of the mind. Its element is light. Given that this chakra has to do with intuition, One might wonder, why doesn't observation haki begin and end with the third eye? While it is true in the physical sense, we would look at our brains being our true selves simply in a vessel that we know as our body. This sentiment is not entirely true in the spiritual sense. When spirituality is involved, it is actually our hearts that make us who we are on the inside. This is even true in the world of One Piece. First example I would want to point to is the way mantra is said to work. It is described as hearing the voice of living beings. But this doesn't mean it's their minds that they are listening to, it's their emotion, the force that comes from their heart. Once again, recall when Law had the Straw Hats switch bodies. It wasn't their brains that were transferred, but rather their hearts. The purpose of our minds is to store information like data for our hearts to call upon as memories. Oh, what a coincidence! The character with the third eye has memory powers. Or maybe that's not a coincidence. More on that later. If we were to just be brains, inhabiting a body, operating purely off data, then we'd be no different than robots. It's truly our emotions that make us alive, rather than us just being self-operating objects. Have you ever heard of photographic memory? It takes a really powerful mind to have one. That's because it's using the light element of the third eye to put together an image made from the data stored in the brain. That data, or in other words, memories, wouldn't be there had the heart not experienced those events in the past. Now, what if the heart could experience something before it happened? The first level only reacts to things as they are happening in the present. The second level uses the light of the mind to put together a mental image of what is going to happen. That seems like it's seeing the future, but what it's actually doing is giving you a memory of something that hasn't even happened yet. Future sight is great and all, but the downside is that it requires a great deal of concentration. Given that the different levels to which spiritual existence can be interpreted, it stands to reason that there are levels to which a person can perceive spiritual presence. What I mean by this is that not all observation haki is equal when it comes to what can be perceived. Being able to see into the future is one way that observation haki can go beyond basic. However, characters like Aiza and Kobe have observation so powerful it's almost like they can read minds. Really, what they are doing is interpreting the voice of emotions. There is an emotional plane of existence when it comes to the spirit. Also, look at Zoro and the breath of all things. That's advanced observation because not only could he detect the presence of living things, but non-living things as well. Then you have the voice of all things that only some are able to inherently hear. I believe this all has to do with being able to use the third eye to see all spiritual levels of existence. And what do you know? Big Mom said that a person of the third eye tribe would be able to read the poneglyph. In my opinion, that means they have to unlock, activate, and master the third eye chakra. It only makes sense that someone of the third eye tribe would be able to master the full potential of the third eye chakra, which would then give them the ability to see what is meant to be heard by the voice of all things. Also, is it any surprise that the person with a third eye also has a power centered around memory, data, and photography? The root word for photo is light, just like the element of the third eye. I already told you that throat chakra is one of the two, and by process of elimination, the crown chakra is also associated with conqueror's haki. But come on, that was a given. Of course, a crown goes to the power meant to rule over others. In Skypiea, haki is known as mantra. They seem to exclusively use observation haki, which is ironic because the name is most suited for conqueror's haki. Mantras are tools used in spirituality to affect vibrations internally or externally. When it's external, it is verbal, and when it's internal, it is a thought. There are many names for this: mantra, meditation, prayer, but you just basically have to think of it as an inner and outer voice. Yes, we speak with our throats, so it's quite obvious where we'll be starting off at. There are two elements to describe throat chakra best: ether and sound, and some may say lightning, but we'll talk about that much later. Ether can mean sky, the place where heaven is located, but ether's true origin lies with it being the air that the Greek gods breathe. Remember, haki by itself means supreme chi, and chi means breath. Do you see where I'm going with this? Where heart chakra is just regular air we breathe, throat chakra is godly breath, or rather, supreme breath. And don't you remember in part 1 and 2, the other name I gave Supreme Breath? It was voice. And where did your voice come from? The throat, of course. Ether is just another way of saying haki, or voice. Conqueror's haki is the embodiment of spirit. Remember when I said heart was like DNA? Well, the soul is the spiritual body that is formed by that DNA. Basically, since the element of throat chakra is ether, it's like saying that the element is haki itself. Conqueror's haki is soul, or in other words, haki in its rawest form. King's haki is like that of a spiritual roar. In fact, isn't there a character known as Roar of the Seas? Oh yeah, I made a video about why I think Apu's devil fruit could be Conqueror's haki. Conqueror's haki, on the other hand, is just a force. It is intangible. Do you know of a vibrational energy that is non-physical but can do physical damage? One that comes to mind is called sound. You know, like what Apu's devil fruit powers are? Now that we know that throat chakra's element is sound, just like Apu's ability, it just makes that theory all the more credible. Check out that vid if you haven't already. When Conqueror's haki is used, it seems to be an invisible force that affects people. That may sound supernatural. I could easily call it an astral or ethereal attack, and it is. But there is an invisible force that can be used as a weapon to deliberately harm people that exist in real life. Yes, the real world that you and I live in. It's called sound. Music and spirituality are joined at the hip. Think about this. The word spirit means breath. Well, what is the process of breathing? You breathe in and out. In, out. In, out. In, out. In, out. In, out. It is a ripple. Breaths have a different wavelength, frequency, and rhythm. Breathing itself is a song, one that begins and ends with one's life. Brook may seem like a skeleton, but he is in fact a spirit inhabiting those bones. To further show evidence that his spiritual powers are linked to throat chakra, let's talk about how he even discovered he could become a phantom. Recall when I said throat chakra is the external vibration, aka verbal. Well, in order for Brook to become a ghost that first time, he said, "I'm going ghost!" Okay, no. Actually, what he said was a prayer. Case in point, just like with Conqueror's haki, he activated his spirit with his throat chakra. And just like the spirit of a homie, Brook's true body originates in the ethereal realm, hence why he would be able to harm Prometheus. Remember when I said third eye deals with the mind? It might lead you to believe that chakra is centered in the brain, but it is between the eyebrows. It is the crown chakra that is located in the brain, in the physical sense, but in the spiritual sense, it's sort of on top of your head, you know, like an actual crown or a halo. However, calling it the mind would be underselling it. It's more like your reality. It is everything that you've been building up to through all the chakras. The associating element is thought, the most powerful of all elements. What is a voice without a thought? Remember Chi? When Mother Caramel creates a homie, she said that she would give it a voice. In fact, in one of the secret endings, I compared my theory to that of the Klabartaman, a spirit inhabiting a ship, which I believe to be the result of Conqueror's haki. And what do you know? Big Mom's ship has its own spirit. Big Mom's power perfectly encapsulates the crown chakra element, which is one of the biggest reasons why I believe the power of thought is Conqueror's true power. In the first instance of seeing Luffy use Conqueror's haki, he calmly stated to the bull his intent. He used his voice to get across his will. But really, it was what was on his mind that mattered most. The thing about Luffy is that 99% of the time, he speaks his thoughts aloud. He's constantly projecting the most powerful element, his thoughts. In my Cursed Blade theory, I said the swordsmith may have had Conqueror's haki because they wanted to be the best swordsmith in the world. King of the swordsmith, I guess you could say. However, I think it's more than that. I believe it's about how passionately one devotes their self to whatever they put out into the world. It is said that a lot of people with Conqueror's haki are people that make a name for themselves. That's what they put out into the world. Their presence, their life, their tale. It's what you put out into the world by creating. There are those that forged poneglyphs or swords that could be a great example of using chakras haki in whatever they make.